Hi, and welcome back to the HU Enable podcast. This is the show all about sharing our experiences of disability, neurodivergence, and long-term health conditions in UK higher education. I'm Cath, and this week I am joined by Fliss. Fliss is the founder of the AuDHD Coach, a neurodiversity coaching service specialising in burnout, self-compassion, and reconnecting with creativity. They are also currently a postgraduate student at Coventry University, completing a return to practice programme after originally graduating from the University of East Anglia, where they trained as a speech and language therapist. I'm super excited to have Fliss on the show today, and I can't wait to get started. Hi Fliss, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Hi, Kath. Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh no, absolutely my pleasure. So, we've had a bit of a chat already. I know a bit about your background, but please could you introduce yourself to the listeners and share a little bit about your background in higher education?
Yeah, of course. So as Kath said, I originally went to university to study to become a speech and language therapist, and I loved the profession and I loved working as a speech and language therapist. But I also got super passionate in a classic ADHD side quest way about politics and like the impact this has on like the services that we use and that patients and clients were using, and like how we basically just needed more of them. And that inspired me to then study a master's in public policy and get into more lobbying roles. And then I had quite a few years of working across different charities, sort of working across advocacy work, lobbying for law changes, etc., and working across disability. And then I also then retrained as an ADHD certified coach. And through doing that, I realised actually I would love to be able to revisit the speech and language therapy profession. So I'm actually a student again at the minute because I'm completing a return to practice programme at Coventry University, the University of Coventry.
One of them.
Both could be the official name.
I'm sure there'll be someone just shaking their fist at us. But, no, it's this one. It's this one.
I mean, I should know I'm there, but it wouldn't be the first time that I've forgotten the title of something. Not gonna lie.
If it's any consolation, so I went to York, which is University of York, but there is York University in Canada. There have been members of staff, and they're on each other's exchange programs. It's hilarious. But there are members of staff who will just tag the wrong uni, and it'll be like, whoops, we think you meant that one.
That makes me feel much better. We're all in this together.
Yeah, it's one of my personal enjoyments is just going through LinkedIn and just saying, oh, you tagged the wrong one. Oop. Maybe check our tags. It's very silly personal entertainment. But anyway, let's get back on topic. Next question. So obviously I said you're an AuDHD coach at the top of the show. Bit of foreshadowing there. But if you are comfortable saying, how did your disability, neurodivergence, long-term health conditions impact your experience of higher education?
Yeah, definitely. As Kath said, there's no spoilers there. That I'm actually I'm autistic, ADHD, and I've got dyspraxia. But actually, when I first went to university, I had no idea about that. So I previously was epileptic, and I've been seizure free for quite a few years now. But it was interesting navigating university as someone with like a long-term health condition. But actually, that had no idea about my own neurodivergence. I'd say university has been something that's probably really inspired me in the work that I do. And fortunately, in terms of like how polar opposite my experience was. And I feel like for a lot of neurodivergent people, especially pre any diagnosis, I know that this can really resonate with like how I had some amazing times, but I also had some really challenging times. But actually, through being epileptic, I was first becoming then comfortable with advocating for myself and advocating with having a disability. But all of that stuff is so entangled. But yeah, so some bits there, some other bits a bit not so much. That makes no sense.
No, I get it.
So to you with the usual.
Yes, I mean, I've kind of had a very good range of guests recently, and actually a few that probably cover a lot of the bases that we're talking about, which I think is very important, and we're getting a lot of coverage here. Because I had Oscar on the show, who is the chair of the Disabled Students Network Society at Manchester Metropolitan. He has non-epileptic seizures, and that shaped a lot of his story. And then it was also Katie last week, fantastic lecturer at Manchester, who also got a late diagnosis, basically after transitioning into lecturing, realized, oh my goodness, this is super hard. Like, why is this specifically so hard and draining and burning me out? And they got she got an autism diagnosis. So I think you're just like hearing everything is just like such a perfect combination, I guess, of just everything we've had over the past few weeks. Not that like health conditions are necessarily the like.
There we go. You've been leading up to this combined presentation. I'm like, which disability do you want me to start with?
Yeah, you have health conditions. Yay! That isn't how I meant it. That isn't how I meant it. But like, I think it's really nice that I'm deep enough into the show where we see people from different backgrounds.
Exactly.
And different walks of life, and finding that representation. And I think building the depth of that is amazing. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, definitely. No, thank you for everything that you're doing. And like, I'd say there's so many different angles to disability advocacy as well. Having like obviously worked in it like a policy level too, you're like, actually everyone's got different needs, and it's so good to be able to hear different voices. So it's like, I think as well for myself, like, every condition that I have has shaped my experience, but it's from a slightly different angle. And obviously I could take you down a rabbit hole about each and every one of them. So
maybe we'll do it after. I think we're on the clock for now, unfortunately. So obviously when you first came into uni, you had like epilepsy, and then the neurodivergence came later. So feel free to answer this question from the standpoint of your initial degrees or from what you're doing at the moment. But what was your experience accessing higher education from a disability standpoint?
I think especially because of the job that I do now, and like part of this has like really fueled the work that I do with people at present. When I thought about this question, when looking at some of these questions in advance, I was really thinking about my neurodivergence and how that shaped a lot of my university experiences, and really like these kind of polarizing experiences that I'd had. And it's so interesting doing a course like speech and language therapy, so working in a field where you're learning about different conditions, but you're learning about it, so much of it through the medical model. Yes, we started to enter a bit of person-centered care, and there was a bit of talk of the social model of disability, but I'd really say that actually from first learning that course, and I know they've moved a long way since then, actually that it was part of what was kind of negative about even before I knew I was neurodivergent, is the way that you taught and learnt about it was so far removed from like lived personal experience. And even at that point, how quickly we've come along, like even when looking and assessing children, again, it was looking for young boys, not to say that it was exclusively that autistic people would be young boys, but it was, again, you can see how from working at different angles for understanding neurodiversity, how these things come about, and how these stereotypes and like the lack of representation that we've had for a long time can entrench itself in different careers. But from actually a practical point of doing my course, again, I just had I had some really positive experiences with like engaging with lectures and things, but also had some really challenging placement experiences, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, with just like not understanding my kind of neurodivergent needs, and always kind of feeling like I was missing the mark somehow, or not understanding what was expected from me, or just like, to be honest, having some really challenging times reflecting back on what people misperceived as like basically neurodivergent traits.
Yeah, and I think it's also really interesting what you said with like the medical and the social models, because I know this is a bit of a contentious issue, but I think in a lot of contexts, the medical model does have a place in medicine, right? Because you have to be able to, like, even, especially for some benefits nowadays, you have to, like, name your deficits, essentially, and where you're struggling. Not that I like using that.
Change the system.
Yeah, not that I like saying that, but that is what it is, and it is still in use, and in a way, so that people can get the support that they need, it's important that we abide by it to an extent. But I don't necessarily see why that also needs to be applied into education, especially with support. So I guess it's, especially with speech and language in a clinical setting, is it something about like finding the happy medium where those two can coexist? Because that sounds quite hard.
Yeah, definitely. I think for the way that I'm approaching it is I'm kind of like re-entering the profession and kind of familiarizing myself with the clinical content with such a strong neuroaffirming practice hat on, and the strong like lived experience level is to be able to translate to people, to be able to say like, look, this may be what an assessment sounds like, this may be what like a treatment plan sounds like, but this is how it means actually for you. And like when we look at those things, being able to just reframe that language, and even if like you say it serves a purpose, it's going to be on someone's notes or we need to use it, it's being able to be empowered enough and empower the people we work with to be like, you know what, this may not be how it presents for you, but we need to use it for this system. But actually, let's take you out of the system, and who are you as a person, and how can we affirm what those traits actually mean for you?
And it's more making sure that people could separate themselves from what's on the paper.
Exactly, 100%. And I'm sure like you've spoken about this with other people that you've interviewed, because I know you've interviewed a lot of different people who are neurodivergent, but it's also just like thinking back to university, it's so good that there is much more understanding now, but it's even just like doing the typical thing of just like, even with essays and coursework and things, just always never knowing where I'd missed the mark or never really understanding what the brief was. I'd find that I often would either score really highly or kind of fail something and be like, I don't even know why I failed it. And for me, I was like, that was a really symbolic of how I often felt when doing academic work. I'd feel like I could either really excel at it or I'd feel like I'd missed the mark. And I was like, what's even happened here? I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like something was missing.
I mean, yeah, so I actually had Ollie and Amelia on the show a while ago, and a big part of that conversation was Amelia, like Ollie was helping her to interpret questions because they were just very ambiguously worded. And I think it's a big thing with, especially if you're autistic and you have a tendency to take things literally, I think that can really make academic questions difficult, or like some essay questions. So I don't know how we ended up here from social and medical model, but I'm glad that we're having this conversation because it shows that it's not just happening to one person. And obviously we know that, but it's nice to hear it firsthand.
Definitely. And I think that as well, when I like working with people and having like met so many different people from across like with different neurodivergent conditions, there can be so many different presentations. But I think something I especially experienced definitely pre-diagnosis as well, that like came to how I experienced university, is like situational variability and just differences that people don't realize in like ways that you may be able to articulate yourself, but you might not be able to process as much. So sometimes I felt like that, like it would be quite difficult advocating for my needs, especially before knowing I was neurodivergent, because I would be in front of someone talking to them and they'd be like, oh, I don't understand how you wouldn't understand this. And I'd be like, then obviously instead of being able to take that out and be like, oh, actually the question is just really wordy and probably a headache for all of us to understand, but let alone if you're neurodivergent and you're like, just tell me what it means, break it down into bullet points. I don't get what you're asking of me. I'm also then having to hold the shame of like, oh, is it a me problem that, you know, I don't seem to be able to get this. So yeah, it's so interesting reflecting back.
You're bringing back memories of me just like lying in bed, just like in like my teenage years and like early 20s, and just being like, oh, so here's the conversation I would have had if I'd grasped that at the time.
Exactly. Because that's the thing. I think I was like, when somebody just broke it down, I was like, oh yeah, obviously I get that. And it's so funny now because it's like, even thinking of all those feelings that I had and all that shame, how that like has completely dissipated now, and being able to understand my condition, who I am, and just like how simple these things are, and how like actually, you know what, this is about the language, this isn't about me as a person, it's just the language just needs to change. And then once it's changed, how much better that is.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so glad you're bringing this to speech and language. I think one person whose episode you really like is actually Katie's last week. I've already mentioned her, but I completely forgot as I said it that she does speech and language child learning centre, does speech and language stuff.
Oh, how interesting. What a coincidence. That sounds amazing. Yeah, I would love to need to get listening to that. And what a great person to interview.
Oh yeah, she's a joy. Definitely. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear about it from another speech and language person. So we've already alluded to this a little bit, this next question, with I think you mentioned stuff about placements. I think we've had a conversation about placements off the show, and to be honest, anything else that you're interested in mentioning. Did you encounter any obstacles during your experience of higher education? Did you overcome them? And if so, how?
Yeah, it was an interesting one to reflect back on, because actually my first experience of higher education, so my first degree, doing the course I found really challenging because of sometimes even the lack of understanding that my lecturers had about neurodivergence and not being diagnosed myself. Sometimes obviously coming up against these problems where I was perceived, like I got told that I was sort of too hyperactive, too loud, too chatty, like essentially a lot of what I'm sure a lot of neurodivergent people listening can relate to, of just like being perceived to be too much. And obviously for me, I would come in, I would be so enthusiastic. I constantly felt like I needed to be different. And I actually then also experienced that on placement as well. Like I remember what I spoke to you, Cath, about, that I felt really passionate about, is how much when you are a healthcare student across the board, or any, to be honest, course where you need to do a placement and you're relying on your supervisor to pass you, actually how vulnerable you are. And like as a disabled person and as a neurodivergent person, like, and especially that this was, going on 10 plus years ago, how, like when you are misunderstood, how difficult that can be. And like, obviously, as I said, I didn't know at the time that I had ADHD. So when I would maybe need a bit more support with different areas, or just the way I presented, like in terms of just like, obviously, I feel so sad for myself, even thinking of times of being criticized for being like too enthusiastic, basically, and not realizing that should never be a problem for anyone. But even just like on some placements, like getting feedback that would be like, I would be amazing with the patients, with the clients, like doing really good work. But then like I remember having it have to be recorded on a specific placement with the supervisor, who said that then at lunchtime that I would speak too fast and get too excited. Like and actually how a lunchtime would be, it should be like, when I'm speaking to her as my supervisor, it's a professional space. So I need to be, it would be this idea of needing to be professional. And I'm doing like, what's it, the inverted quote markers. And I think that's a really difficult thing as a neurodivergent individual, of this abstract concept of professionalism and how the bar would always change. So my most previous job before I've been, doing my own business and working for myself, coaching people, I was working with the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, working with paediatric trainees about developing national guidance for like how neurodivergent paediatric trainees could be supported better. It's so interesting when you speak to people how you can be doing a kind of a completely different profession, but it's almost like someone could say word for word the experience that you had when training and coming into these sort of jobs or placements.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing that got me thinking is, if you have no space to unmask in your lunch or your breaks, not only is that, in my opinion, a bit silly, maybe I'm just an unprofessional person, but it's also just not sustainable at all. Because if you're masking 8 hours a day and you don't have anyone you trust to let your guard down around, that can be really, really detrimental to the quality of your practice.
Completely. And also like I do think what I passionately advocate for, and like now having the opportunity to go back, is that we deliver person-centered care for people. So that means meeting people where they are and their needs, and being able to adapt to their communication styles. And that's what I think is the grace that every student deserves. But specifically from my own personal experience from being a healthcare student and from working in healthcare professions, it's like this diversity of people's experiences and the way that they present is only what makes the profession richer. So I think that, when I think back to myself, I'm like, actually, I've had to do a lot of work to recognize those sides of myself. And really, like I said before, like enthusiasm, being, full of energy. Those are things that make me a great speech and language therapist. Those are things that make me a great coach. And those are good things about me as a person. They're never things that I should have thought were a problem. But actually, like these kind of entrenched views of the ways things have always been done or the way you should act, I don't think they really benefit anyone, if I'm honest.
No, I'm going to be honest. So I spent a year working in a school, mainly reading interventions, so not speech and language. That's not what I'm trained in. But I found that being neurodivergent actually helped me relate to the students I was working with a lot more. Obviously, I ask about higher education stuff. Every episode, I ask about people's experiences of disability proving helpful. But in a clinical setting as well, I can imagine that if you have someone coming in who is, there's no obvious neurodivergence, but sometimes you can get that vibe. They're like, oh, okay, this person's a little bit different too. That can help people, especially like neurodivergent kids, to come out of their shell a lot more. And I was wondering whether, I'll ask about your higher education stuff later, but whether you think your neurodivergence has helped in a clinical setting as well.
Oh, 100%. And there's actually research that shows this as well. That's like, if you are a neurodivergent person working with neurodivergent clients, so kids, adults, etc., like there is a real benefit to exactly what you named, that shared lived experience, but also that shared communication patterns, that shared affirmation, like neuroaffirming care of like, actually, there's nothing wrong with you. You just do things differently. We use disabled in terms of like the language, like as you said, language is so important to be able to access your benefits, to be able to access the equality law. Like if you're not, able to recognize your disability or long-term condition, like you won't, be able to access the benefits and the protection and the resources. But when it comes to like day to day, when you think what actually prohibits you from doing some aspects of your life, sometimes it is these views that align with the social model, that's like actually a view of how someone should behave or how someone should act is the disabling part, not the person and the way they're acting so much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think like this isn't necessarily a view I agree with, but even if we took the medical model and you could see someone struggling and like you're a neurodivergent person who's just for whatever reason just really locked into the medical model, you could still see, oh, this person's struggling with this. Oh, but here's like a weird solution I found. And then at that point, you're not even like, it's not even a social medical model thing. It's just people finding solutions.
Exactly. And moreover as well, like when thinking about the wider implications, like, so something I did struggle with, but wouldn't have been able to name it at the time at university was burnout. And that was like kind of my first experiences of it. And I'd say that then, like, having experienced that in my career as well, like a huge part of what contributes to burnout is stigma and shame. And that is the part that we can remove from working, and like being able to embrace different styles of working and being able to affirm people as they are for different things. So that's why I also think it's so important. And I think it's a huge benefit to clinical practice, a huge benefit across all different professions, to be honest. Like there are different ways of doing things, and there are ways we can change our environment that can be really useful. And there's also innate things that we do and ways that we do things that can be really beneficial. Like, I'm thinking about, like you said, being able to relate to people, being able to problem solve. There's lots of different abilities that when you're in the right environment and you're not like feeling this intense sense of shame, that you're able to just like basically get on with it and get into your flow, which I think is the most important thing, right?
Yeah. And I think another big thing that can contribute to burnout is also just advocating where there isn't the resources. And I'm guessing this is the last question I'll ask last little tangent before I keep on the questions. But that advocacy, especially in higher education itself, again, I had a great chat with Katie about this last week. But I don't think talking to you about this is going to really rehash anything. Do you notice that in a clinical space as well, where the advocacy also can contribute to the burnout? Or do you think it's a much more like neuroaffirming, aware, inclusive space?
Oh, 100%. Like, and obviously, and in the roles that I did, I actually specifically worked in like advocacy, lobbying, etc. And like even in the structures that sometimes, like you can work across charities, healthcare trusts, all different areas. if they've not got a good solid understanding of neuroaffirming practice, and you're constantly there having to advocate for yourself and others, that's exhausting in itself. Like, the best thing that we can recommend that people do is to, like in any sort of marginalized group, right, is to educate themselves. So you as a person are not proactively having to educate everybody about your condition. Like, it's obviously amazing if you learn enough about yourself that you know what works for you and what doesn't, and to be able to say that. But I think definitely the organisations, etc., can meet people halfway and actually proactively be like, we know these different things can be useful. How about we try them for you? Because it's almost, you get stuck in a bit of that catch-22 where you're like, well, I don't even know what advice would help me. So how do I even know what to ask for?
Yeah. I've always been a big advocate of making like reasonable adjustment frameworks. People are like, oh, but I don't want to be put in a box. But it's like, that's great. If people don't know what they need, at least build a framework that you can then edit, which is like exactly what I do with the questions on the show. It's not a matter of we want to put you in a box, it's that some people just don't know what support they need. And it's just having that bespoke approach, which I think is really important. Right. I just wanted to close with that. We're going to pull ourselves back to the questions now. Like the little side quest we just went on with that conversation, I have in the notes here that you were a side quest queen.
Oh yeah, I wrote. This is how I do it. I love the structure of the questions, but I was like, I need to not write too much so that I can be energetic in the moment. So I've got myself a little hint of what I'm going to say.
I need to write less so Cath can drag me on tangents. So next question: were there or are there any clubs, societies, or initiatives that made a significant positive difference to your experience of higher education?
Yes, there. Like, I can't tell you, like. So because of some things that I've sort of touched upon, at times the course that I studied wasn't always a safe space for me. It wasn't a space where I always felt seen or heard. And like, that shame could really undermine the value that I felt about myself, in all honesty with you, as even as a person and what I was bringing, which is really sad to say, really. But actually, what I found to be so affirming, and as an autistic ADHD, like, I think this is so important, is all these different clubs and activities that I was interested in. Yes, sometimes it was a lot to manage, trying to do lots of different things on top of my course, but actually being able to connect with people outside of just what was my work, essentially my uni work, was incredible. And I did so many different things. I got very eager and out there, but just to name a couple, like, and as I mentioned before, I'm dyspraxic. I had never really played sport properly. I'd said to myself, oh, that's not for me. But actually, I thought when I was in uni, I was like, why not? I'll give it a go. Ridiculously, I didn't even own a proper pair of trainers. I don't even. I wore a pair of sandals or something to the first day, which is absolutely rogue. And I joined the korfball club. So when I went to UEA, it was one of the biggest societies there at the time. And I was no good at the sport, I can't tell you. There were 6 teams and I was in team 6, but I absolutely loved it. Like, that was the first time, to be honest, I'd really been able to access team sports. And like, I was like, oh, now I can see what people are talking about, because I didn't have to be good at it, but I could just go and I could have fun, and I just loved it.
I know that like korfball is a name of a sport, but what does it actually entail? If you have like 1 or 2 sentences of just summary, please.
Yeah, of course. This is testing me now. So it's a Dutch sport, and it's actually so mixed gender, so everybody can be included, and it's kind of a mix between basketball and netball. And you have, I think it's 8 players in your team, and you have 2 sides, so similar to like netball basketball court, and your aim is to shoot the ball into the korf, which is the equivalent of the hoop. I can't remember exactly all the rules, but you basically get to play attack and defense. Like, you'll play, I think it was 4 quarters, then you'll play like each quarter in either attack or defense. But I'll be honest with you, I haven't played it for a long time, so I might just start making up some rules. So that's enough that I can give you a flavour.
That is fair. I mean, we love an inclusive sport. Please take notes, the International Olympic Committee.
Oh, 100%. I played a lot of like queer sport when I left uni as well, like inclusive clubs, and I was like, it just makes it better. These rules serve no one.
No. But we're gonna pull ourselves back now. Not because I don't want to have a conversation about that, but I could probably get quite impassioned and I want to keep on time. So
100%.
I obviously already asked you about clinical practice and your neurodivergence proving helpful in that setting. But I wanted to ask you specifically about your time at uni and in higher education. Have you experienced any instances of your disability, neurodivergence proving helpful in that setting?
Yeah, I guess all the things I mentioned before, like just being able to relate to lots of different types of people. Like, I do think in a profession where you're learning and you're working with people a lot, for me, the way that my traits mixed in with my personality mixed together, I think that that was a real strength to the work that I did. And I guess like, because of always, like, from a young age feeling like I was different or a bit of an outsider, and I also resonate this with, like, I guess my queerness too, but being able to just be inclusive. So even thinking of things like when I played korfball, being able to make people feel included and comfortable. And I worked at the bar and the coffee shop at uni and mixed with a lot of different people. And I think it's like part of my neurodivergent experience was being able to connect with such a range of different people because of those traits as well.
Yeah, and it's that intersection, isn't it? So, I'm non-binary as well. I believe that's also how you identify.
Yeah, that's how I
Yeah,
identify.
and I think it's just finding that people at that intersection are amazing. I know that a higher proportion of gender non-conforming folk are also neurodivergent. I think it's an incredible statistic, but it also means that in a way you kind of get two communities in one.
Definitely.
And it's so wonderful. I had the same at both unis, actually, that I went to. It's such a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yeah, exactly. Amazing. And actually, I think what you said there is so important. I think that is the strength that a lot of us who are neurodivergent have, and we have intersecting identities too, is the ability, like, that's been a thread in everything that I've done, is my ability to advocate for myself and others. And like, as we said before, sometimes you shouldn't have to, that shouldn't have to be on you, but your ability to see a rule and ask why, like, does this need to be this way, couldn't we do it differently, and being able to actually get creative, because you're like, actually, we don't have to do things the way things have always been done. We can just throw the book up in the air and do it our own way. I think that energizes me all day long.
Shout out to our favorite neuroqueer folks. Great community.
Exactly. Neuroqueer is such a great, like, word and identity, and I resonate with it so much.
Oh, I love it. Do they have a flag, neuroqueer?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like there was something I was looking at the other day, because obviously it was Neurodiversity Celebration Week, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
like, if not, we should create one. You should put that out to your listeners to have a competition.
You know what? I think I had Louisa on the show a while ago, a guest who's turned into just a good friend. And I think it was her who there was an intersectional neurodiversity flag. There's an Instagram account for it. I might dig it out and send it to you after the show.
Oh, do. I'd love to see it. Thank you.
No worries. I think or someone she knew, but it's just dope. So
amazing, yeah.
We've kind of been hopping around this conversation a bit today, just because you obviously went to uni, had a break, discovered a lot of things about yourself, including your neurodivergent diagnoses, and then you've come back as a return to practice student for speech and language. Has taking a break from university and coming back, do you think it's changed your approach to education nowadays?
Yeah, it's like light and day, like the ability that now I'm able to advocate for myself, understand the resources that are available to me, but also my approach. Like, obviously, like, this specific course, right, coming back and into a profession, it's like very intrinsically linked to like who you are, right, because it's also your job. And I know, like, because some studies aren't as much linked like that, whereas this specific one, where you are studying to become this specific job, it's changed everything about how I would now practice as a speech and language therapist for the better, as well as obviously how I advocate for myself and the grace that I give myself to.
Yeah, is it very much do you see it just in your social approach, or do you think it's helped you academically as well, in terms of actually just written work and the essays and the bureaucratic bit?
It's been really empowering coming back, because actually I had such an affirming experience that in enrolling into this course and meeting with the university, that I'm actually working with them on a collaborative project to develop some training and guidance for their healthcare professional supervisors to support the neurodivergent students on placement. So for me, that really felt like a full circle moment, coming back to education, coming back to this profession that I actually felt nervous about because of unfortunately having those challenging experiences, and actually being like, you know what, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to help make it better for others. What I think is so important is the resources and the understanding, and that is what can help make a difference. So it's been great to be able to be involved in that way. And when it comes to my academic work, yeah, I really understand how I work now. I really understand like how I need the question to be worded, like what adjustments I may need and how to ask for them, what is available, as well as just like how I need to work. Like, you know, I'd work in a certain way when I was at uni the first time, and I wouldn't understand like why I'd do it. Like, you know, like I'd get up early before any of my housemates were awake so that I could focus and like make sure like all these different things. But now obviously I can just put on some noise cancelling headphones, you know, different stuff that's like, you know, being able to use different strategies to organize my time, etc. And obviously ask for help where I need it, and be aware now of the signs when I'm burning out, so I don't have to just like feel like I'm sort of diving into it all the time and kind of overwhelmed.
Yeah, it ends up making things a lot more sustainable, especially I think because if you're not diagnosed, unless you're the kind of person who kind of realizes that you're neurodivergent and can preemptively put things in place, you're not going to know to keep like an eye out for the signs of burnout. You're not going to know necessarily what kind of structure works for you. And there's a big power in getting that diagnosis so you're able to capture that, I feel like.
Definitely. And like and so much of the work that I do now and what inspired me to do it is because burnout can look so different from what we understand it to be when you're neurodivergent, especially like, you know, multiple intersecting neurodivergence too. And also what restores us is so different from what we've been told. So like even when I mentioned Corfu and all the different societies that I did, it's like something that traditionally you might be like, oh no, what you need to do when you feel burnt out is you need to do less, you need to sit, you need to do nothing. But actually, so much of what restores me as a neurodivergent person, where, like, you know, it's all at different levels, right? Different levels of burnout. But what I mean when I'm starting to feel burnout is doing things that stimulate me, can give me a break, can give my brain something to focus on, and something I can be creative with. They're really ways that I help to express myself that I wouldn't have allowed myself to do before either. I'd have been like, well, no, this work has to get done and you can't do anything else until this piece of work is done. Whereas actually the work gets done better if I'm allowing myself to rest, and rest in a way that I know is going to restore me, then come back to it.
I think there's a study somewhere about how in neurodivergent folk engaging in activities and crafts, like I think it was like repetitive tasks like crochet or knitting, I could be wrong, it could be sport as well, activates the same neural networks as meditation would do in neurotypical folk. I can't remember where that study is from, but I swear I heard about it at some point, and in an intuitive way, it does make sense.
Yeah, and that's consistent with the research that I've seen as well, because I think that, like, you know, people have this because of, like, again, all the models and structures we've talked about, because of a certain brain type being kind of the dominant way people thought that everybody behaved, or maybe should behave, in very commas. Like, we've kind of all been taught this like one way of being, right, is the way that people can restore themselves. And it's fascinating when you read about stuff like that, because you're like, as a neurodivergent person, you're like, yes, it does make more sense that if I'm doing something low key and repetitive, I can actually switch off. Actually, it's giving your brain a container, right, to be able to focus it enough that it's not having to use loads of energy, that you don't have no focus whatsoever. Because actually, when you don't have a focus, that's when you can kind of be all expansive, and you need that to be contained, but you need it to be at the right level for you to actually be able to switch off.
Literally yesterday, I was like, it got to the afternoon, I'd done no work, I got overwhelmed, I think I crocheted half a bookmark and like felt way better.
Oh my God. And as we live and breathe. Oh my gosh.
Maybe I should be a coach. Who knows?
Well, we did discuss this before, because that is what I do when working with people. It's just like understanding what works for them. Because I think, especially if you're neurodivergent, like if you've got a brain that can take stuff literally as well, like when you see stuff, you're like, oh, well, it's hard sometimes. You think, oh, why isn't this working for me? Why isn't this working for me? And sometimes it's only when you work with someone that they're like, right, come on, let's step back. You don't need to do it like that. What do you actually enjoy and what does work for you? It's like the person's never the problem. It's like the approach, right? In these specific contexts.
Yeah, so please breathe. Take a step back.
Yeah.
We're going to breathe together. This is kind of a similar question to what I already asked, but how have your experience at university specifically, because I know you left, well, you graduated, but you've returned after a while. How do you think your experiences at UEA informed how you're approaching your return to practice at Coventry now?
It's just the sense that I have of myself and like how I want to work and how I see myself as well. So it's like being able to do things in the way that suits me and being able to ask if I need something to be changed has been core to like how I show up at doing the course again. And actually, I guess the passion that I have now from everything that I understood of sometimes the more challenging experiences I've had across university the first time and across professional experiences, to kind of use those to shape what I'm really passionate about working to change now.
Yeah. And
is that the kind of angle you were looking for? Is that like,
that's great.
If there was a different angle, yeah. Cool.
I ask these questions and whatever I hear is wonderful. And if it's okay, I'm going to keep that in because I want to show people that it is okay. Only if you want.
Oh no, of course.
Final question. So we've covered a lot of ground today. My goodness, there was about 20 minutes worth of tangents in there and I loved it. And we've obviously gone from, we've spoken about your coaching, we've spoken about your first degree and korfball and side quests and everything wonderful. And then returning to practice at Coventry and having it where you're now making resources and you're working with, it was the Royal College of like Pediatric Practitioners or something like that, right?
Yeah. So I previously worked with the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health to like influence better practices for neurodivergent paediatrician trainees.
Thank you. That was it. So that and everything else. And I just wanted to ask you, in one or two sentences, based on everything we've said today, as our final question, what is one key takeaway that you would like listeners to remember from your story?
Because of the challenging experiences that I'd had, I knew I was a great speech and language therapist. And I knew I was also passionate about policy and changing the laws and doing all of that other stuff. But I knew that I was sad to leave the profession because I was also like, oh, this is something I could be really good at. But it just didn't seem to work for me in the way that worked at the time. But with all of this knowledge, I at times was like, I could never go back to speech and language therapy because I had a lot of shame around it. But through understanding more about myself and my neurodivergence and like reframing the way I look at all different things, that I've now given myself permission to go back and do it differently. And I don't know what one takeaway that is for the listeners to get from that story, but it's like that. I think when I thought about a story and books being finished, I assumed speech and language therapy was finished. But to be honest, it's only just beginning. That's so lame and cheesy.
Oh no, I love it. Sometimes the thing is, sometimes cheesy is like the right way to go, not because it's cheesy and I want to say it because it's like nice and reassuring, but it is just how it is, and it's just nice. Like it's cheesy because it's like a little bit I guess uber positive, but I think that definitely has its place sometime. And actually I went to go and see Matilda last night on the West End.
Ooh.
Look, I turned 26 on Monday and I needed to get my £10 TikTok young person tickets fully exploited before my birthday. And that's all about rewriting your story as well, and how even if you're placed in a story, that doesn't mean that your place in it is set and you can rewrite it. And now I'm being cheesy.
I know, I think that really resonates. Gosh, oh my gosh, how emotional. No, but that's exactly what it is. Like, and I think like actually thinking about coming and speaking to you, like I said, when I was like, who would have thought when I left that course and I was like, thank God I've got through that, that I would be like now reflecting on those experiences, seeing where things could have been better, and then working with a university now to be like, right, let's make sure people don't experience that again. It's felt so powerful to be able to do that. So I'm really pleased. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I know not all neurodivergent folk like people saying this, but I'm very proud of you and your journey. It's just so...
a journey.
It's a journey. It sounds like a journey.
I mean, and it's still, and we're still going, but like, yeah, like definitely, yeah.
Absolutely right. We're gonna wrap up because we are almost to time.
We're gonna ramble now.
Now it's my turn to ramble. HE Enabled is the show dedicated to sharing our experiences of disability, neurodivergence, and long-term health conditions in UK higher education. If you are listening to this episode before the 5th of April, which is a wonderful Easter Sunday in the UK, then you are listening on Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting the show. If you are listening to this on the 5th of April and want to drop me a birthday present for the 6th of April, please consider supporting the show on Patreon, or you can buy me a coffee via the link tree, which will be in the episode description. I keep saying show description. That's never been right. Episode description. I am also in the process of launching the HE Enabled website. Please do keep an eye out on my socials for when that launches. It would be so great to see you over there. But other than that, I think we're all wrapped up. Fliss, thank you so much for coming on.
How exciting. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Oh, absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.